A cold modem sound echoing through a dark room in the 1990s. Only scrolling lines on the screen. No face, no name, only data. Today, most of us don't remember how vulnerable the internet once was. But back then, the digital world was like a city without locks. And the first people who entered it weren't thieves. They were explorers. This is the story of one of those explorers. A man who once protected the internet, then taught others how to exploit it, and eventually became one of the biggest targets inside the world he helped create. His name is Max Butler. Some called him a security expert. Some called him a cybercriminal. But the underground knew him by another name, Iceman. In this documentary, we won't just watch the crimes of a hacker. We will watch how a mind slowly loses the boundary. Because some people aren't born to break systems. They break them because they understand them better than anyone else.
Max Butler, how a good hacker became a criminal. Born in Idaho in 1972, Max encountered technology at a very early age. His father worked with electronics and computers. The house was always full of dismantled devices, cables, and circuit boards. But what truly shaped his childhood wasn't technology. It was the need for control. When his parents separated, Max was still young. For a child, family is the safest system in the world, and that system had collapsed. My interpretation is this: from that point on, Max moved away from the unpredictability of people and escaped into a world where rules were mathematical. Computers don't make mistakes, they simply execute commands. That's why computers became not just a hobby for him, but a psychological refuge.
The guardian of the internet. In the mid-1990s, the internet was a chaotic place. The firewalls and intrusion detection systems we have today did not exist. Companies were being hacked but didn't even understand what had happened. Max did something important here. He analyzed hackers' attack methods and extracted signatures. He wrote early versions of what we now call IDS logic. Here I see a critical personality trait. Max wasn't hacking to destroy the system, he was hacking to completely understand it. But a person who fully understands a system eventually reaches the point where they can bypass it. That line is dangerous for security experts. Why did he enter military systems? In 1998, he accessed U.S. military networks without authorization. This event is often described simply as a hacker attack, but in reality, the motivation was more complex. At the time, there was a serious vulnerability in the network. Max saw the flaw and, from his perspective, wanted to clean it. He entered the system and removed malicious scripts, but he left a back door when exiting. And this is where the crime begins. My interpretation, the act did not start with malicious intent. This is a classic hacker mistake, becoming possessive of a system while believing you are protecting it. Max began to see himself as authorized, and in law, this is the most dangerous point. Not intent, but authorization matters. For that reason, the court found him guilty and sent him to prison.
Between the state and the criminal, the FBI period. Before Max Butler built his criminal empire, he stood in a very unusual position. He was neither fully a criminal nor fully a security professional. In the late 1990s, law enforcement didn't understand the internet. Hackers were anonymous, left almost no traces, and were technically more knowledgeable than the police. That is why security agencies sometimes need hackers to catch hackers. Max stepped in at this point. At the time, he was an expert who tested corporate networks and understood attack techniques extremely well. Authorities began using his knowledge. He wasn't an official agent, but he was a source of information.
He explained how attacks were carried out, described the tools being used, and helped analyze the methods of other hackers. My interpretation is this. This cooperation created a dangerous perception in Max's mind. He began to see himself not as someone outside the system, but above it. Because he was no longer just a hacker. He was the hacker who caught hackers. The line begins to fade. After a while, a strange situation emerged. Max was both reporting vulnerabilities and using those same vulnerabilities himself. There is a classic psychological shift here. A person who learns how to protect a system also learns how easy it is to exploit it. And people often fall into this mistake. I'm not causing harm, I'm just testing. That is exactly what happened when he entered the military systems. From his perspective, he cleaned the network, but he had no authorization. For the law, intent does not matter, access permission does. That is why he was prosecuted by the same institutions he once helped. After this event, the relationship was completely broken.
The architect of a criminal economy. After leaving prison, Max could not return to his old world. Security companies refused to hire him. He had expertise, but no legal place to use it. That's when he realized something important. The problem wasn't the hackers stealing cards. The problem was the lack of organization. In the early 2000s, credit card fraud was chaotic. One hacker stole data, another tried to sell it. Buyers couldn't trust sellers, and sellers were often scammed. Even the underground had a trust problem. Max decided to solve it. But he didn't do it like the police. He did it like an engineer. Hacking the hackers. First, he infiltrated rival forums. He didn't just join. He behaved like a system administrator. He found vulnerabilities, copied databases, and extracted user lists. Then he waited. When forums shut down, users looked for a new place, and a ready platform appeared in front of them. Carter's Market. This wasn't a simple forum. It was infrastructure designed for crime. Designing trust. Max's greatest innovation wasn't stealing money. It was creating trust. Everyone on the site had a rating. Sellers operated through reputation. An escrow system existed. Money didn't go to the seller until the buyer received the product. The underground version of what we see now in e-commerce platforms. My interpretation: here, Max acted not as a hacker, but as an economic architect. He transformed crime from an individual act into an industry. The data factory. Credit cards were no longer just hacked. ATM cameras, malware, data breaches, phishing sites, they all merged into the same marketplace. Now, no one needed deep technical knowledge. They just bought access. This was the birth of the modern cybercrime model. Specialization. One steals data, one sells it, one withdraws money, one launders it. Max gathered them under one roof. Then he made his most critical move. He took over rival carding forums one by one and moved their users into his system. Suddenly, the market connected to a single center. You no longer had to be a hacker to commit cybercrime. You only had to be a customer. That's why some researchers consider him not just a hacker, but one of the first digital crime organizers. Conclusion: Max Butler wasn't the first person to steal data, but he made crime scalable. And perhaps for the first time in internet history, crime became independent of individual skill. A person didn't even need to understand computers anymore, because someone had already built the infrastructure. Then the hunt began. As Carter's Market grew, its invisibility faded.
In the underground world, size means power, but for law enforcement, size means traces. For years, Max built layers to hide his identity, chains of proxies, compromised servers, fake identities, encrypted drives. Catching him using traditional methods was impossible. So the investigation began differently. Agents searched not for the person, but for the behavior. The fingerprint of behavior. Every hacker writes code, but not every hacker thinks the same way. Max's way of entering systems was unusual. He didn't damage servers, he organized them. He erased logs but left systems operational. My interpretation, this wasn't the behavior of a typical criminal, but of an administrator, and that exposed him. Investigators began seeing the same style across different intrusions. It was clear someone was managing the attacks. The mistake. For years, he made no technical errors, but people are rarely caught by technical mistakes. They are caught by habits. Max frequently logged in to monitor rival forums. The timing and access patterns began to repeat. At one point, one of the connection chains was traced back to a real machine. His identity wasn't directly revealed, but the circle tightened. The net closes. Months of surveillance followed. Agents waited, because the goal wasn't just to shut down the site, it was to understand the network. Users, money flow, roles, the entire organization was mapped. My view, this was no longer a hacker investigation, it was a mafia investigation. The arrest. In 2007, the operation was carried out. When his computers were seized, the real battle began. The disks were fully encrypted. Months of analysis followed. When the data was finally opened, millions of card records were found. In a way, it was ironic. The man who dedicated his life to breaking encryption would be remembered by his own. End. Max remained invisible for years, but the system he built made him visible. Because small crimes can hide, organizations leave traces, and in the end, the hunter was caught inside his own map.
In the darkest hours of the night, the screens go dark, the servers fall silent, and only one question remains. Can one person truly change the world? Max never wanted to be a hero. He only wanted to understand the system, the people, and power. He made wrong choices. He broke the law. He got lost inside the world he created. But the irony was this: the mind once seen as a threat eventually became the one protecting millions. The internet is not just a network of cables, it is humanity's shared memory. And sometimes the ones who save it are the ones who know best how to break it. Not every hacker is a criminal. Not every system is secure. And not every story is black and white. This was not the story of a criminal, but of a mind pushing boundaries. Perhaps the real question is, who protects the system and from whom? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories.